You ever have one of those moments where someone's audacity is so outrageous, so unbelievable, that you almost admire it for a second before the anger hits you? That was me lying on my pool float. One quiet Saturday afternoon, beer in hand, when a teenage voice barked out, "Hey, old man, get out of the pool." I cracked one eye open, and there he was. Some rich kid designer, clothes arms crossed, looking at me like I was the help. Then he said it loud and proud. "This is HOA property. My mom runs this neighborhood. You need to leave." I almost laughed. If this brat knew who he was talking to, he'd have sprinted the other way. 6 months earlier, I'd moved into Willowbrook Estates. Picture-perfect lawns, matching mailboxes, neighbors who waved just enough to seem friendly, but not enough to actually talk. It was quiet, clean, and expensive, exactly what I needed when I took a new position with the county. I figured I'd found peace. What I didn't realize was that I'd just walked into a dictatorship disguised as a homeowners association. On my third day there, I met her, Karen Mitchell. She showed up with a basket of muffins and that smile women like her wear when they're about to say something condescending. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she sang. "I'm the HOA president. I just wanted to make sure you got your welcome packet, 47 pages of community guidelines." She mentioned my moving truck had blocked a neighbor's driveway for 20 minutes. "Just a friendly reminder," she added sweetly, "we take parking violations very seriously." I nodded polite, but in my head I already knew what I was dealing with. Karen was the kind of woman who treated power like a designer accessory meant to be shown off. Now, I didn't tell anyone what I did for a living. When people hear sheriff, they act different. Suddenly every barbecue turns into a therapy session or a confession. So I kept it simple: public service county work. It was true enough. That choice ended up being both my biggest mistake and my greatest advantage. A week later, I met her son, Brandon, 17, spoiled beyond belief. The kind of kid who thought rules were just suggestions for other people. I met him at 2 in the morning when his base was shaking my windows. I walked over, knocked, and asked politely if he could turn it down. He smirked. "Dude, it's not even late. My mom's the HOA president. We can do whatever we want." He wasn't lying. Over the next few months, I heard that phrase more times than I can count. Karen had built her little empire. The HOA board was stacked with people too scared or too dependent to say no. Every meeting was a performance. If she liked you, your grass could be a jungle and no one cared. If she didn't, one weed meant a $200 fine. Mrs. Patterson, the sweet 70-year-old widow 3 doors down, got fined for her garden gnomes that had been there since before half the neighborhood was even built. The Johnsons got a citation because their Honda was unsightly. 3 inches over the parking line, Karen measured it herself. And Brandon learned from the best. Loud parties, broken fences, entitled smirks. When neighbors complained, Karen threatened to sue them for harassment. I tried to stay out of it. I had enough headaches at work. But the more I watched, the angrier I got. People weren't living, they were surviving her. Conversation stopped when Karen walked by. Eyes dropped. Everyone afraid of the next fine, the next inspection. It wasn't a neighborhood anymore. It was her kingdom. Then one day it became personal. Brandon parked across my driveway, dumped beer cans in my yard, even revved his engine every morning just to piss me off. And Karen, she sent letters: "My grass too long," my work truck commercial. I complied when she was right, ignored her when she wasn't. But I started documenting. Photos, dates, copies of letters. Just collecting. Old habits die hard. And then came the pool incident. I was floating, minding my business, when Brandon stormed in like he owned the place. "Get out. HOA property." I laughed. "Kid, this is my backyard." His smirk didn't fade. "My mom showed me the maps. This whole area belongs to the HOA." "The maps?" "Right." I told him to leave. He pulled out his phone, furious. "You're done. My mom's gonna destroy you." "I'll wait," I said, and took a sip of my beer. 5 minutes later she arrived. Karen Mitchell in full yoga warrior mode, face flushed, phone in hand, like it was a weapon. "What is going on here?" she demanded. "Your son trespassed on my property," I said calmly. "I've asked him to leave." She ignored that. According to the HOA records, this pool area is community property. She waved her phone in my face, showing a crude fake map that looked like it had been made in Microsoft Paint. "You're trespassing," she said again. "You'll be fined heavily, and I'll be recommending legal action." Brandon was filming, grinning. My neighbors peeked from windows, too scared to speak. Karen wasn't just flexing power, she was performing. "You're finished," she sneered. "And that truck of yours, I'm having it towed tomorrow. Commercial vehicles are prohibited." They walked off laughing. I looked at my waterproof camera light, still blinking red. I'd recorded every word. "Consequences," I muttered. "Yeah, Karen. Let's talk about consequences." That night there was a knock at my door. Mrs. Patterson. She looked nervous, holding a casserole dish like a shield. "I saw what happened," she whispered. Inside she broke down. Karen had fined her thousands over the years. Wrong mailbox color doormat, too big porch light too bright. She'd skipped medication to pay those fines. "Why should I have to leave my home because of that woman?" she cried. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. Over the next few days, others came. Tom Johnson told me how his car got keyed until he paid a fine. The Chen's lawnmower was stolen by Brandon. Then they got fined for an unkempt lawn. The Rodriguez's daughter rejected Brandon at school, and their house was egged a week later. Marcus Webb's fence was vandalized, and Karen fined him for the eyesore. Each story worse than the last. I realized this wasn't just abuse of authority, it was extortion, and everyone was too scared to fight back. Until that week. After the pool, Brandon doubled down. Honking, trash-dumping, slashed tires. The final straw came that Friday night. I got home late to find my backyard wrecked. Beer bottles floating in the pool, pizza boxes everywhere, my grill shoved into the water, and every single neighbor had watched in silence. Mrs. Patterson apologized through tears. She said she'd make our lives hell if we called the cops. I looked at her and said, "Not anymore." Saturday morning I filed the reports not with the HOA, but with my own office. Trespassing, harassment, vandalism, every piece of evidence attached. Then I made some calls to the county attorney, the state HOA regulatory board, and a few friends in civil enforcement. By Sunday night the trap was set. Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting for Monday, thinking she'd humiliate me. She didn't know she'd just scheduled her own downfall. When I walked into the community center, the place was packed. Karen sat at the front power suit, full makeup, basking in her own arrogance. Brandon front row phone, ready to record his victory. She started the meeting with fake concern. "We have a serious situation threatening our community. This man," she pointed at me like I was a criminal, "has repeatedly violated HOA rules, occupied community property, and harassed my family." She clicked her slideshow photos of my house, my truck, me by the pool. "His behavior is unacceptable," she declared. "I'm recommending $15,000 in fines and removal from the community." People murmured. She had done it. She thought she'd broken me. Then she smiled and said, "Does the accused have anything to say?" I stood up calm. Actually, yes. I walked to the front, folder in hand. First I said about that so-called community property. I held up my property deed stamped by the county. "This is my land, always has been." I laid it out along with survey maps and zoning confirmation. All public record. Karen tried to interrupt. "Those could be forged." "They're not," I said. "Anyone can verify them." Then I pulled out my tablet. "Now let's talk harassment." I pressed play. The projector lit up with footage from my security cameras, Brandon and his buddies climbing my fence, partying, smashing bottles, pushing my grill into the pool. The room went silent. "This lasted 4 hours," I said. "Trespassing, vandalism, destruction of property, all recorded." Karen's face drained of color. Brandon's jaw tightened. "That's taken out of context," she stammered. "There's 6 hours of footage, Karen," I said. "Would you like me to play all of it?" Then I turned to the neighbors. "Mrs. Patterson," I called. She stood trembling but spoke. "She fined me for my garden gnomes $200, said they broke aesthetic standards." "The Johnsons?" I asked. Tom rose. She measured our parking spot with a ruler, charged us $500. Marcus stood next. She fined me for vandalism, someone else did. One by one, the people Karen had terrorized for years found their voices. The stories poured out like floodwater. Karen tried to shout over them, but it was too late. When the noise quieted, I looked at her and said, "You know, Karen, I haven't just been your neighbor these past 6 months." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my badge. "I'm Sheriff Michael Reeves, elected sheriff of this county, and you and your son are in serious trouble." The reaction was immediate. Gasps, whispers, phones out. Brandon dropped his. Karen froze. You lied," she sputtered. "You said you worked for the county." "I do," I said, "just not the way you thought." I laid out the final folder: bank records, fines, unauthorized assessments. "You've been stealing from this community. Embezzlement, fraud, abuse of power." She went pale. "You can't prove that." "Already did," I said. "Warrant, probable cause, and everything." Then I turned to the crowd. "Here's what's going to happen. Brandon Mitchell, I face the kid. You're under arrest for trespassing, vandalism, and destruction of property." He stepped back. "You can't arrest me," he shouted, and then he shoved me. "Big mistake." The room went dead silent. I pulled out my cuffs. "Brandon Mitchell, you're under arrest for assaulting a law enforcement officer." He backed away, eyes wide. "No, you can't." 2 deputies entered right on cue. Karen screamed as they took him by the arms. "You can't do this." "That's my son." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "And he's also a criminal right now." She lunged, shrieking about lawyers and lawsuits, until one deputy gently moved her aside. The board members, pale and sweating, looked lost. Finally, one spoke. "Karen, I think we need a vote." He raised his hand. All in favor of removing Karen Mitchell as HOA president. Every single hand went up. Every one. Karen stood there, shaking, mascara streaking down her face. "You're all traitors," she hissed. Mrs. Patterson, voice steady, said, "No, Karen, we're just free." I watched as deputies escorted her out, still screaming about revenge and connections. I didn't say anything until the door closed behind her. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then someone clapped. Then another. Within seconds, the place erupted. I didn't celebrate. I just stood there, tired, watching the relief wash over people who'd been scared for far too long. They didn't need a hero, they just needed a chance to be heard. And that's where it ended. Right there in that community center, surrounded by neighbors, finally breathing again, while Karen's empire crumbled behind her. You want the truth. Bullies survive on silence. They feed on fear, thrive on the idea that good people won't fight back. But the moment someone says enough, everything changes. Because real power, it doesn't come from fear. It comes from standing up.